Today we'll return to the bell from our first video in this series. But before we look under the Great Pyramid, let us recall the words of Genesis.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse, and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together He called seas. And God saw that it was good.
Here we stop at the vault that separates the waters from the waters. This means the waters on earth from the waters above the firmament. Note that initially our earth appeared as an abyssal pool. If we assume that the universe is not a vacuum, but that there is an infinite amount of water above the firmament, it could be some gigantic whirlpool. By the way, such a water vortex has a similarity to the so-called protoplanetary disk. Is this a coincidence? True, the water vortex moves in a spiral, while the protoplanetary disk is made up of circles. But it is also possible that we live in a kind of bubble, a bubble that was suddenly created by some energetic intervention, because everything is of an energetic nature. There is a very rare painting by Leonardo da Vinci called Salvator Mundi, Savior of the World. Many people believe, and the mainstream says the same thing, that he is holding a crystal ball. Let's take a closer look. As you can see, it's a ball of water. There are bubbles painted on the bottom. Perhaps as an intention to make us understand that it's water, perhaps the bubbles represent worlds, of which there are infinitely many. Inside the water ball are 3 lights like the Trinity of God. By the way, in recent years, people have been seeing this sign in the sky and believe it is a flying machine. This is probably because these lights move in a triangular formation. Let's continue with Genesis. At the moment when the atmosphere was formed above the watery abyss, the creation of the earth itself occurs through the accumulation of waters under the sky, the earth's vault. Let us assume that a bubble of some kind formed in a huge amount of water. Today we call this phenomenon capillary depression and capillary elevation, with the difference that the water was also above the atmosphere, and its cause was not the capillarity of water, but something else. We'll help ourselves with this bell, which actually represents the shape of the Earth. But how can an air bubble spontaneously form in water? Let us remember that water contains hydrogen and oxygen. Perhaps we could consider the biblical quote,
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
For some kind of energetic intervention, creation energy of thought and the like. And land appeared. But how could land have formed when there was only water around? Remember when we used to show petrified sea animals and even petrified sea waves on this channel? What about the huge stone balls that were actually gigantic hailstones, as mentioned in the Bible? But how could the petrification of water have occurred? Again, we have to remember that everything is energy. Everything vibrates at certain frequencies. If you change these frequencies, you change the entire structure. We can compare it to overclocking an engine or your PC. The performance of your car can be higher or lower, just like a personal computer. If our Earth is a biblical water mountain set in a square pool, the situation might look something like this. A kind of capillary elevation has been created through the pool. Some of this water has been transformed into a solid stone structure. Another thing is our core, which may have the function of holding our atmosphere together thanks to its enormous energy and magnetic field. It is possible that the cause of the biblical Armageddon is a core event that caused a global flood. However, this situation reminded me of the Schumann resonance. It is very likely that the Earth's core, which is already a kind of chimera for me and not a hot iron ball as mainstream science claims, is also the most likely cause of this bulge of water. This picture captures the situation perfectly, except that it's Titan with an icy surface, while Earth is covered in rocks. However, I believe that these resonances and the core are exclusively related to Earth. And there's a good reason for that, as I'll explain later. Schumann resonances occur between the Earth's core and the ionosphere. So we can imagine the Earth as a conductor, the atmosphere as an insulator, and the upper layer of the atmosphere, the ionosphere, again acts as a conductor, a bit like a capacitor. We cannot hear the Schumann resonance, but more sensitive people can perceive it. This resonance is very unusual and forms an incredible pattern. It's like the Earth is singing, right? After all, you can try simulating the Schumann resonance on a similar device. And notice that the resonator is shaped like a spiral. Remember this spiral, we'll come back to it later. Are you tired? Are you tired of the current explanation and wondering where the Great Pyramid is? Nothing can be rushed. All of this is important to know in order to understand what is hidden under the Great Pyramid. Is this all just a coincidence? Can someone tell us? But not everything is said in Genesis. But notice that God created light because there was darkness above the place where the earth was created. So God created the sun. Adam as the sun, Eve as the earth's core, as energetic objects. Adama, the sun, with the attribute of lion and fire. Eve, the moon and earth, with the attribute of the eagle and water. In other words, the following verses say that the stars, moon, and sun were placed in the firmament of heaven. They are therefore part of our atmosphere.
And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day.
So let's repeat that. We have a kind of square pool, but it's probably in a huge water universe. Then we have an energy core, which probably resonates. And thanks to its energy field, we have an atmosphere and solid ground under our feet. By solid land, I mean rock, the bottom of the oceans. On this basis were erected gigantic pillars, which we saw in the scans mainly on the North American continent. These gigantic pillars held up some amazing networks, and these networks in turn supported the plates of the earth. These plates were carved with a large number of channels, the real Atlantis. I will remind those who do not look regularly that the petroglyphs on the Nazca Plain are messages. The whales that anchored the pillars of the earth. The spider that spun the global earth web. The monkey who tied the net to the pillars. And birds that came down from the sky and carved the earth's plates with water channels. Their footprints can still be seen on Google Earth today. In many of these uncovered areas, strategic raw materials are being extracted, but modern cities are also being built along these lines. So what is hidden in outer space? It seems that we are surrounded by an enormous amount of water, and water is the beginning of everything. And space flights in such a space are absolutely unthinkable.
The principle of all things is water. Everything comes from water and returns to water.
However, the Earth's pool may not necessarily be material, but energetic. And here it is time to look at the pyramids. The internet has been abuzz with reports of the alleged discovery of a secret city beneath the pyramids of Giza. A research team led by retired chemist Dr. Corrado Malanga and former academic and remote sensing expert Dr. Filippo Biondi claim to have discovered and reconstructed vast 38,000-year-old structures buried deep beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza. But there's one catch: it's all underwater. As for the 38,000-year age, this is relevant. Contrary to mainstream archaeology, researchers have agreed that the age of water erosion around the Sphinx is at least 30,000 years old, and that's not all. Thoth is mentioned in the Emerald Tablets texts as having built the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx. The Emerald Tablets are estimated to be 36,000 years old. All of this contradicts the mainstream interpretation of Egyptian history. According to Malanga and Biondi, they discovered 8 shafts surrounded by spiral paths that connect to 2 90-meter cubic structures. Above the shafts, they found 5 structures that are interconnected by corridors. Based on what appears to be an artificial intelligence reconstruction, they and others hypothesize that these structures are part of a legendary ancient city or even a prehistoric energy structure, power plant. Rumors of hidden structures beneath the Giza Plateau are nothing new. The idea dates back to the ancient Greek historian Herodotus and resurfaced intermittently throughout the Middle Ages and Renaissance. It became particularly popular among French scholars in the 19th century, and, again, in the 20th century, when American clairvoyant Edgar Cayce popularized the idea that a secret Hall of Records was buried beneath the pyramid complex. There is also the idea of a power plant, supposedly built by aliens. It is part of a broader conspiracy theory that attributes impressive ancient architectural designs to aliens. These ideas, which contradict mainstream archaeology, are generally dismissed as pseudoscientific, often ridiculed and labeled as conspiracies. But it also mocks ancient philosophy, which provides a true picture of our world. Egyptian archaeologist Dr. Zahi Hawass, a former minister of antiquities, called the claims baseless, noting that the Egyptian Council of Antiquities had not granted permission for this kind of research at Khafra's pyramid.
I'm working in archaeology for 45 years. Technology never showed to me anything convincing at all.
The most important piece of information here is the groundwater level at Giza. An intensive study conducted in 2019 revealed that the groundwater level at Giza is only a few dozen meters below the surface of the plateau. The proximity of the groundwater means that even today, the Sphinx and other monuments are slowly eroding due to water that occasionally seeps from underground. The discovery of Dr. Filippo Biondi and Dr. Corrado Malanga was completely ignored by mainstream archaeology and essentially dismissed the theory. If neither of these gentlemen had a doctorate, they would probably have been relegated to the level of conspiracy theorists and amateurs. Moreover, no one is surprised by the fact that the Giza Plateau was created artificially, and the ruins of buildings visible from the satellite are literally embedded in the limestone. So they remember at least the period of construction of the Great Pyramid, more than 35,000 years ago. Not 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, by slaves who served Pharaoh Khufu, who did not exist. There are entire blocks of buildings buried in the limestone, as if someone had cut them up. The satellite image still shows traces of windows. So we will support Dr. Filippo Biondi and Dr. Corrado Malanga in their claims about the energy structure under the pyramid. When viewed from above, we see the pyramid as a square with the letter pi encoded in it, which means a circle inside a square. So let's assume that the pyramid is a model of our Earth. What we don't see here, however, is the octagon symbol, which means that the rotation diagram of the Earth's pool is missing. We can therefore assume, even considering what has been buried and preserved in the nearby limestone for tens of thousands of years, that this is a symbol of the closure of our Earth. This is probably a symbol of the end of one Platonic period and the end of the previous civilization, as well as the transition of humanity into darkness, or whatever it is more accurately called. But we can speak with certainty of the casting of humanity into matter. Now you may be wondering, what do the walls of the pyramid mean? I think these may be the invisible crooked mirrors of our world that are sometimes talked about. We can go to the Denver airport for a hint. Inside the Denver airport, you'll find this world map with 4 panels rising above it. This is probably a symbol of the 4 walls of a pyramid. We're talking about mirrors here, but these panels have a grid structure. You might think it's a decorative element. But let's take a look at a video of an amateur astronomer who captured something that, according to modern astronomy, doesn't belong there.
I want want you to look at this. This is serious. This is with the new telescope.
Yeah, it's serious,
Well,
definitely.
what is this ring? And then look what happens when I zoom in. Look at this grid-like pattern behind it. What in the world? What is that?
Wow, that's strange. Huh.
I have never seen anything like it. Guys, what in the world is that? Wow.
Yeah.
I don't even know what's...
How is it possible that telescopes costing millions of dollars can't detect anything like this? What are they actually showing us? Let's look at the situation in the Great Pyramid. The king's chamber represents the sun, and the queen's chamber below represents the earth or earth's core. Further corridors lead to the lower chamber, which was very likely once home to another vertical shaft. This means that at least the lower chamber was underwater. However, the shaft was filled in due to groundwater. Also note the shafts that are perpendicular to the walls of the pyramid. However, these shafts are blinded to the queen's chamber. The mouth of the northern shaft was explored by a robot. Around the opening are these images, which are very fine and detailed and were most likely created by a laser. What does this remind you of? In my opinion, it is similar to the refraction of a ray passing through a four-sided pyramid, but with the difference that it encounters an obstacle inside the pyramid. If, as in the case of the shafts of the Great Pyramid, the beam were to fall perpendicularly onto the wall of the pyramid, it would continue onto the opposite wall, where it would break. But in the Great Pyramid, that's not the case, because we have two obstacles here, the king's chamber and the queen's chamber. It almost looks like these rays are merging, and we must also remember that water and light are energy elements. You could almost talk about cold fusion, right? Cold fusion has long been considered a mirage. We're talking about a ray of water. We have hydrogen, oxygen, light, but also other elements like deuterium, tritium, and others that, according to science, have existed since the Big Bang. So they have existed since the very beginning of our world's existence. And here we could continue the topic of the origin of life. But let's return to the ray of water, which was certainly the first element of creation, and I am sure was also used to cut megalithic stone blocks. We're looking at a simple diagram of cold fusion. The cathode represents a negative charge. The anode represents a positive charge. Much like in the Great Pyramid, the king's chamber might represent the cathode, and the queen's chamber the anode. The queen's chamber, representing the earth, may have been supplied with groundwater from great depths, while the king's chamber, representing the sun, was supplied with water from the atmosphere. Remember, our atmosphere also contains a large amount of water vapor. This begs the question, what is the true nature of our sun? Unbelievable, but true. For this to work, we need another source, which is electrolyte. An electrolyte is a substance that, in an aqueous or other solution, dissociates into ions, thereby enabling the conduction of electric current. A strong electrolyte is, for example, a salt solution. However, according to Plato, salt did not exist on Earth at all before the cataclysm. Here we can orient ourselves according to the Bible, when Lot's wife looked back and turned into a pillar of salt. But when you look at the gigantic amount of salt, not only in the world's oceans and salt mines, you can probably guess that it was not just Lot's wife, but the entire civilization of that time. So salt could not have acted as a catalyst here, and we need to look much deeper. All of these images are true and have one thing in common: 8 energy pillars embedded at great depth into unidentifiable blocks. Even this picture is true, as we will show in a moment. There are various ideas about what might be under the Great Pyramid, but only one is likely to be true. There is also a belief that there are other chambers here, which may or may not be true, given that erosion and landslides in the bedrock may have occurred over thousands of years. However, this picture will be closest to the truth: 8 columns anchored in some kind of blocks. The question is whether there is one energy pillar in each of the blocks, or whether each of the pillars has its own anchorage. This is a device called a quartz cuvette. A quartz cuvette is a small, transparent container made of high-purity fused quartz, used to hold liquid samples during spectroscopic measurements. It is used primarily in the ultraviolet and visible regions of the spectrum. Unfortunately, I have never studied optics, but as you can see, there is some kind of connection between the visible and invisible light spectrum. But it could be an energy wave that manifests itself as a thermal anomaly directly in the pyramid. This means that it does not have to be a solid formation at all. Perhaps this spiral wave is related to what we are able to see in this world and what we are no longer able to see. Perhaps the 2 blocked shafts leading to the Queen's chamber are also related to what we are not allowed to see. But notice the number 8. 8 energy pillars and an octagon as a half right angle rotation of the Earth's pool. Is it possible that these 8 pillars could be connected to Earth's cataclysms? Maybe this is another clue. Maybe we're looking at a sophisticated time machine. And let us always remember that our world is vibrations, light, water, magnetism, and electricity. This is also the essence of life. Let's see where we can find this scheme, and you will be surprised. There are currently around 120 historical obelisks in the world. Essentially, this is the same model of the situation under the Great Pyramid as the diagram of our Earth. Note the proportions of the pyramid at the top and the immense height of the column. Dr. Malanga and Dr. Biondi claim that the structure beneath the pyramid reaches a depth of about 2 kilometers. It's astonishing how they came to this conclusion, but they're probably right. This is one of the 2 obelisks in Luxor. The other was taken to Paris. Why are there so many obelisks in the world? Look, here is not a symbol of a pyramid, but of a double-headed eagle. The sun and the earth, the moon, the earth's core. I wonder why, instead of obelisks, a statue of Buddha or a sacred bull was not placed here. The obelisk has much greater significance. The Bosnian obelisk, what do we know about it? It's said to be several centuries old. But notice the decoration. See the spirals? There are 4 spirals, and they run from the base to the edges of the upper pyramid. 4 energy pillars. And where are the other 4 pillars? Are they inactive? Could these be the 4 biblical angels in each corner of the earth? And what if these are the real pillars of the earth mentioned in the Book of Enoch?
After this, it happened that I again saw many chariots with men riding on them. They came on the wings of the wind from the east and the west to the south. As soon as the noise of their chariots was heard, there was a commotion, and the saints in heaven saw it. And the pillars of the earth were moved out of their places. It was heard from one end of heaven to the other in one day. All fell down and worshiped the Lord of spirits.
The pillars of the earth moved from their places. It evokes in me the shift of the earth's pool and the earth's magnetic pole. Anyway, this is a very significant clue. As for the top of the pyramid on this obelisk, we see a seated sphere. Perhaps it is a replica of God's all-seeing eye. Now we move on to the most important part, the Vatican. The symbol of our earth is the tomb of St. Peter. More precisely, what is located above it. The pyramid is represented here by a canopy with a square base. The columns at the top continue as angelic beings, one angel at each corner. On the underside of the canopy is a dove on a cross. It is just another representation of an eagle and is a symbol for our earth, the earth's core. Let's look at the details. On the columns, we see angelic beings in detail. In the middle, 2 small angels hold the papal crown and 2 keys, the sun key and the moon key, the keys of Adam and Eve. Detail of an angel during canopy repairs. On the ceiling, we see a crucified dove or an eagle. That is our earth. The sun is not visible here because on earth it shines from the altar. According to the Bible, the sun is an altar, and here we see it in the background in the middle of the image. While the dove under the canopy represents the lunar key, the dove above the altar represents the solar key. The symbol of these keys is also the double-headed eagle. Above the canopy is a dome in the ceiling, which is probably the Earth's vault. From this arrangement, it seems that the pyramid, or also some kind of Earth's mirrors or grid, as we have seen, is probably located under this vault. Notice the detail of the columns. They are spirals that are energetic. Plant twigs were often a symbol of energy. It's the same as the dove carrying a green twig as the beginning of new life. These columns are built into decorated stone blocks. At the bottom of the staircase, there are lamps in the shape of flowers or buds. We have already seen these in the series dedicated to Voynich's manuscript, Flowers of the Earth, Flower Hill. Where else have we seen such a flower hill? Yes, on the Sumerian tablets. The earth is depicted as a flowery hill, and above it is the winged sun as a spiritual being. But we also encounter this shape in everyday life. For example, in architecture. Here we see this shape in the form of columns that support the arch like a vault of the earth. The lintel above the door can be understood as a pool. The middle door has a pyramid-shaped canopy. What about churches, for example? The first church towers were very simple. Later, they became increasingly decorated according to the architectural style. The tower is topped with a pyramid-shaped roof. When viewed from above, the bell in the church tower would appear as a circle within a square. The heart of the bell represents the heart of the earth, the core that is deflecting. Look at this roof. You see the symbol of 4 angels in each corner. We climb each church tower in a spiral. The origin of everything is water, and also vibrations, energy. It is also the origin of life on Earth. Many people claim that we live in the Matrix, in a virtual reality. It is more than certain. But the entire so-called universe is virtual. For example, look at the schematics of Egyptian temples. Many of them resemble more complex schematics of devices, such as a resonator, a laser, and some parts even resemble a cuvette. Try to think about it. Illustrations of Freemasons often depict a chessboard. Is it really a chessboard? Or is it a symbol for pixels, ones and zeros? In the next video, we'll take a look at the so-called universe and see what really happened in 2012. Until then, have a great time.